Good evening, and welcome to the League of Women Voters' third voter forum with candidates from the Public Utility District and the 2nd Congressional District. My name is Kay Ingram. I am co-president of the League of Women Voters of Bellingham and Whatcom County. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Founded in 1920, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization with 800 affiliates across the country. It encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Membership is open to men and women of all ages. There are membership applications in the lobby, and I hope you'll consider joining the League of Women Voters. The voter forums are presented by the League of Women Voters of Bellingham and Whatcom County and the City of Bellingham. The city has provided the facilities and the forums, and it's being televised live by BTV 10. Forums will be repeated on BTV 10, which is Channel 10 on Comcast. They can also be found on demand on the city's website, cob.org, and on low-powered radio stations, KMRE and KAVZ. The Bellingham Herald is our media partner. We thank all of these partners for their generous support, and we hope that if you have the opportunity, you will thank them as well. The forums are the property of the League of Women Voters of Bellingham, Whatcom County, and the City of Bellingham, and they may not be used in any manner without specific written permission from both parties. Please do not use your cell phones for recording purposes. We ask our audience to be respectful. Please no plotting for your candidate because we want as much time as possible for the debate. In addition, please do not communicate orally or visually with any of the candidates. This is the third of our 4 forums that we're hosting this election season. The last forum will be this Saturday, October the 13th at 10 o'clock in the City Council Chambers. Details can be found on our website at lwv.bellinghamwhatcom.org. One note of clarification regarding tonight's forum. Back in July, the League of Women Voters contacted all candidates in the 1st Congressional race appearing on the primary ballot, requesting that they hold the date for tonight's forum. After repeated communications with both campaigns, candidate Susan Delbene confirmed her attendance on September the 25th. Candidate Koster declined our invitation on September the 28th. Because this forum is being broadcast live and recorded for repeat broadcasts on both television and radio, we must adhere to the rules and regulations of the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. These rules relate to all federal-level races and preclude broadcast coverage of only one candidate in a federal race. Consequently, we are not able to present the 1st Congressional debate tonight. There will be an opportunity to see the candidates debate on October 22nd at 1 p.m. on KCTS 9, and that forum is sponsored both by KCTS and the League of Women Voters of Washington. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening, our League co-president, Jane Freudenberger. Jane?
Thank you, Kay. And thank you to the audience and both sets of candidates that are joining us here tonight. It's a hot night for debates, as we all know. Thank goodness for TiVo and C-SPAN and taping and all of that, so us debate junkies can go home and watch the national and state debates. It's great to have you here, however, because these are 2 important races that we're hosting tonight. And now I'm going to tell you a word about our forum rules. Our procedure is to have the candidates toss the die, which you both have done, and they determine the order that they were going to present. Each will have a 2-minute opening statement. Then we will start with a few questions from the League and proceed with mixed questions from the League and from the audience. You, the audience, have index cards, and if you don't have any, raise your hand. The ushers will bring them to you. Please write a question on them if you have one and hand them to the usher. Write clearly and only 1 question per card, please. They will bring them up to our screeners here. League members Joe Collins and Dan White and Elsie Heinrich, And they'll check them just to make sure that they're not a duplicate of a question we've already asked, or, maybe in the transplant of from there to here, we've already asked the question, and legibility. When we start the questions, each candidate will have a 1-minute timed response. The League is famous for our red and yellow cards. The yellow card tells you, the candidate, that you have 15 seconds left to complete your answer. The red card means finish your sentence. You are done. If you hear the bell, that means you're done. Your allotted time is over. Stop. Our timers are League members, Margaret Wall and Jeanette Cochran, and please don't worry, you'll be surprised how long a minute is. You'll get plenty of time to answer. Also for the audience, the usual reminder, turn off your cell phones, please. And please, no applause or any other communications besides your index cards. We want time for the candidate views tonight. We're starting with the Public Utility District Number 1, District 2 contest. Public Utility District Number 1 of Whatcom County, known as the PUD, is a community-based electric and water utility, first chartered in 1923. The PUD serves the electrical needs of 3 industries and the water needs for 10 industries, 2 municipalities, and 50 irrigation customers. Their budget is just over $14 million, and the 3 nonpartisan commissioners are elected on a rotating basis, 1 from each of the 3 county districts. It's a 6-year term. The salary is $23,760 a year, and tonight we have candidates from District 2. So please join me in welcoming those candidates, Mr. Paul Kenner and Mr. Brad Stone. All right, as I told you, they threw the die, and Mr. Stone won, and he chose to give the closing statement, which means he will start first this time with his opening statement. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters and all the other folks that helped bring this forum together. I think it's a way to show the community that we do have nonpartisan races, and that we do have we need to vote down on the ballot. I think they're important. A little bit about me. My wife and I moved here in 2005, and we have 2 children, Grayson and Skylar, 4 and 7. We came to Bellingham in Whatcom County for just a higher quality of life. It's a beautiful place to live. The resources that it offers, the mountains and the water, and it's just remarkable. We quickly have become ingrained in Bellingham. I'm currently the president of the PTA at the Sunnyland Elementary School. Along with, I've been on the board at Bellingham Child Care and Learning Center for 3 years. I give a lot back to the schools that my children attend, and I'm also a stay-at-home dad. I really enjoy my kids and want to watch them grow up. My experience, I became a stay-at-home dad about a year ago, and we decided that we wanted one-parent home. My wife is a local immigration attorney in town, has her own practice, and it just made sense for me to stop being a general contractor and get into the stay-at-home parent role. I wanted to give back to my community, and when I saw the PUD as an option, I felt like the PUD can do more. I feel like the PUD should get involved with renewable energy, and I think that with hard work, we can make that happen. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kenner.
Good evening. My name is Paul Kenner, and I'm running for re-election to the Whatcom County PUD District 2. I would first like to thank the League of Women Voters and the Bellingham Herald and the City of Bellingham, which co-sponsored, I believe. I have served on the PUD for 32 years. I have run 5 elections. I think this is my 6th. It's been an honor for me to serve Whatcom County for those years. And a little bit more about myself. I'm married, have 4 children. In addition to this part-time PUD commissioner job, I have owned Snapper Schuler Kenner Insurance for 38 years, operated for 38 years. I've served on a number of civic boards, including I've been president of the Whatcom Community College Board of Trustees. I've been president of the Whatcom YMCA. I am currently a board member in the Whatcom Business Alliance. It's my belief that my business experience, my degree in business administration, the experience of 30 years plus of serving on the PUD enable me to be uniquely qualified for this position. The PUD is a business. It's a nonprofit business. It's a government business, but it's a $15 million business. We just issued $20 million in bonds. We're in process of $35 million in construction projects over the next 4 years. I think that the business background and the experience I have brings something to the PUD. As far as the next 4 to 6 years, we have a major challenge in front of us, I believe, with water resources, water quality issues. There's associations in the north part of our county that are going to run into some real problems, we believe, with the Department of Health. Their water's not meeting minimum water quality standards. The ag community is really concerned about water rights and lack of water rights, and are they going to have the quantity of water to irrigate their crops? So I believe we've got some major challenges in front of us, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Kenner, you get the first question, and then Mr. Stone will get a chance to answer it too. What do you think voters should know about the PUD and its function in our county? How does it affect the lives of people living here?
The PUD is primarily involved in Cherry Point. We're delivering water utilities to the major industries there. We're delivering electricity to one major client, ConocoPhillips, or Phillips 66 now it's called. That creates a lot of jobs. I mean, there's about 11 industrial clients that we're delivering major supplies to. Those are major Whatcom County jobs. We're in the process of branching out from that and trying to help local water associations, and we're working closely with the ag community. So although we don't deliver a power bill to the general consumers, we don't deliver a water bill to the general consumers, we are actively involved in helping the ag community, small cities, and in industry alike.
Stone?
I agree with Mr. Kenner that we do, the PUD does serve industry, and I firmly believe that the PUD has more to give. I feel like we could make Whatcom County the model county for renewable energy, and I think that if the PUD spent some time working with renewable energy, that we could really make it a wonderful place to live with clean energy and create jobs through that. We have a solar panel manufacturing plant in Bellingham. If we could utilize that in conjunction with city and state and federal government and get some funding and solar panels on top of schools, we could help the schools out.
All right, and Mr. Stone, you get to go first this time. What challenges does the PUD have in ensuring the availability of water for agricultural uses in the county?
I think it comes down to water rights. I think that that's a very gray area, and I think the PUD should get involved more closely with the Department of Ecology. I think that in working and having a sort of a stronger relationship with the Department of Ecology, that we could work out some of these water rights and create a way for agriculture not to worry about whether they're going to have water next year or not.
Mr. Kenner.
I agree that water rights are going to be the major issue with the ag community. They are obviously very concerned that they do not have the water quantity. Many farmers are withdrawing water without the proper water right. We recently did some conservation efforts with BP and Intalco. We were able to save 3 million gallons of water a day. It is our desire to work with the ecology and tribal interests and try to get that 3 million gallons a day to the farm community to improve in-stream flows and hopefully solve some of their problems.
What impact, positive or negative, on the PUD services would occur if the Gateway Pacific Terminal is permitted? And this question goes first to Mr. Kenner.
First of all, we are not involved in the regulatory issues of Gateway Pacific SSA. We are, however, contractually obligated to provide them water. They purchased land from Chevron. Chevron was a customer, didn't take water, but they had a contract demand for 20 years for 5.33 million gallons a day. And that contract was assumable, and so when SSA purchased the Chevron property, we automatically became contractually obligated to provide water if they're approved in the regulatory process.
Again, I agree with Mr. Kenner on that point. The PUD is contractually obligated to do that. But my focus is not solely industry. I still think the PUD can play a large role in broader areas of the county, not just the North County and East County.
Given the PUD's enabling legislation, it appears it could provide sewer district services. Is this something you would consider, and what factors would inform your decision? Mr. Stone.
Sewer district services, quite honestly, I feel like the PUD would take a large amount of work and a large amount of time to develop sewer districts. And I think unless the PUD were to purchase sewer districts, that it would be a difficult challenge.
Kenner?
First of all, we are not authorized to be in the sewer district business. So sewer, unless we get a vote of the public that authorizes us to enter the sewer business, we're not authorized. And so what I would prefer to spend our time on is things that we are authorized to do. And we're authorized to do telecommunications. There is a possible need for broadband in the east part of our county, in the Glacier, Kindle area. And it would be my desire, in fact, we're looking into it right now, of doing a new technology of wireless and delivering it to the East County and really solving a need that they have not been met by the BlackRocks of the world. They're not there yet. You know, the other issues that we're obligated to do by law is the water quality issues and water resource issues. And so I'm really hoping that we can expand into that area in the North County and the agriculture community.
Okay. What are the technical skills or knowledge necessary to perform your duties? And what background do you have to perform them? And we'll start with Mr. Kenner.
When I was appointed in 1980, I wasn't just a layman, I was 30 years old, and I had hardly any technical ability to be a utility manager. So I got to tell you, there was a steep learning curve. Obviously, my business background, my degree in business administration gave me the business skills to take on the role, but there definitely was a learning curve. I learned from two commissioners that have been there a lot longer than I have, and I'm still learning, but certainly over a 30-year period of time, I've certainly learned about the utility business, and from my 38 years in business and being on boards, I certainly know how to run a business, and again, the PUD is a business.
Again, I was a general contractor and had my own business, and I do believe that the three things that you have to have is hard work, just really watching cost, and just clear thinking. And I think I certainly possess those attributes, and I'm just willing to work very hard for the PUD.
Right. This question is for Mr. Stone first. What steps would you recommend to promote environmental stewardship?
Well, the PUD is already involved with the Salmon Recovery Act, and that is that's a positive. I mean, I think we have to really take care of our water. Commissioner Murphy said it best. The PUD is looking into digesters, and his thought process with that was, we're not looking into manure digesters at farms from a standpoint of profitability. We're looking at it from a standpoint of protecting our water and helping with get dairy farms and berry farms together and on the same page, so we can utilize some of those some of those the byproducts from the manure digesters. I think it's a wonderful idea. I don't think it's for profit, and I think that the PUD needs to work harder in getting involved more with the entire community.
Kenner.
The Whatcom PUD environmental stewardship is extremely important. It's a high priority. We've been involved in the Nooksack salmon enhancement and many activities for our environment. As I said earlier, we did conservation efforts with BP and Talco, Alcoa, and saved 3 million gallons of water a day. One of the issues that is not easily understood is that we have one electric customer besides ourselves. We have 2 plants. So we really have one major electrical customer. That customer is taking 25 megawatts of power from Bonneville through us. It's the lowest cost power you can imagine. It's $30 a megawatt hour. Spot market pricing in the general marketplace is 45 and 50 megawatt per hour. Solar and wind is 100 to 120. So we have one customer that's getting all the power they need from Bonneville. So to say we should be involved in alternative energy, there's no need, we don't need it.
You're getting ahead of me because that was the next question.
Sorry.
Mr. Kenner, is not a role for the PUD in increasing alternative energy sources, do you think, in the future perhaps?
As I just said, getting ahead of you, there could be. In PUDs that serve the community in general, with more than 25,000 customers, they are responsible, according to I-937, to blend solar and wind with their normal energy source. If that ever happened, and we had a lot of customers, we would be obligated to deal with wind and solar. The one customer that we have is not going to go from 30 to 80 to $120 a megawatt, particularly when we can supply all the power they need. If we get additional customers, Bonneville will not supply everybody we could get, so we could get in a situation with a lot of increased growth that we would be looking into wind and solar and alternative energy sources.
Your thoughts, Mr. Stone?
I tend to disagree with Mr. Kenner. I do believe that that Whatcom County can and should get involved with other customers to bring in new customers with the idea of renewable energy as sort of the precipice for that. I think that our schools already we're having budget cuts at our schools, and if there's a way for the PUD, maybe not to tackle it on their own, but to tackle it in conjunction with city, state, and county governments, and even federal government, I believe that the PUD could champion that cause and manage that cause very well.
Whatcom PUD is unusual in that it has unused taxing authority. Under what conditions would you consider invoking your taxing authority, Mr. Stone?
I can't, without, I think that's a very general question, and I think that without a certain proposal in front of me, I couldn't see, as the PUD is acting right now, invoking the tax authority.
Kenner.
You're correct. We have never used our taxing authority. Our property tax authority is the same as the Port of Bellingham, so it's a substantial authority that we have. We've never used it. We've run our business like a business, and our ratepayers pay the overhead of our PUD. A circumstance that could come up that we would want to use our taxing authority, not likely to happen, but what if we decided to do, that it made sense to do a condemnation on Puget Energy? And all of a sudden we were going to take over all their facilities and be the provider of electric services in Whatcom County. I don't see that happening. We've looked at it. It's not economically possible in our opinion, but that would be a reason that everybody's affected in the county that it would make sense to use our taxing authority. If for some reason we had to connect all the water associations in the county, might be a reason, again, it's something that would benefit a large group of people, we may be willing to use our taxing authority. But I don't see anything in the near future that would come close to having us use our taxing authority.
We talked about broadband a little bit before, and this will be for Mr. Kenner to begin with. Would the taxing authority have something to do with helping to provide that broadband communication into the parts of the county that don't have it?
Our taxing authority would not be involved in that. Again, that project is small, and if we ever used our taxing authority, it would have to affect the majority of the citizens of Whatcom County. We are using some taxes for that if we go ahead and do it. We've received a grant from the EDI Commission, Whatcom County EDI. The grant was for $217,000. The wireless project, we've not got bids on it yet, but we think it's going to cost somewhere between $250,000 to $275,000 to $300,000. So a large part of that project, if we go forward, will be tax dollars, but not tax dollars that we've used through our taxing authority.
No.
My concern with, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Well, we were talking before about broadband communications, and I wondered if you would use your taxing authority maybe to further that project.
No. I was in the same meeting this past Tuesday with Mr. Kenner, and I don't see using a tax authority with grant money.
What are the main issues that you see the PUD facing in the next 6 years? That goes to Mr. Stone. Sorry.
I think that, again, the issues that we need to be very concerned about are water quality with our, in the county. I think we need to protect our rivers, and I think that's going to be a pretty, it's going to impact a lot of people. And I think that if the PUD can get involved in a larger way with water quality, then we will be in better shape.
Tanner.
Water resource management is definitely going to be the issue of the next 6 years. We've got a lot of entities involved, from the Department of Ecology, Department of Health, small cities, ag community, tribal interests. We've all got kind of a different thing we're looking at and wanting, and we got to get these interests together. We've been trying hard to get issues resolved and water rights resolved. We're not there, and it may end up being an adjudication in federal or state court that ends up doing it, and that'll be an interesting process. But certainly the issues of small cities and water associations, they're in trouble, and ag water rights are going to be the primary thing we're going to be dealing with in the next 6 years.
All right. I think we're ready for our closing statements, and Mr. Stone won the toss and chose to go last, so Mr. Kenner, would you start?
Yeah. Again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this on today. Brad, I want to thank you for being willing to run and being part of the public process. I'm running for re-election simply because it sounds like a political statement, but I really want to finish what we've started in the last few years. We have not made a lot of improvements to our infrastructure in the last 30 years. It's on purpose that we've not done it. The industries we serve wanted to do it all at once, and so $35 million in projects in the next 4 years is by far the biggest thing we've ever tackled. I really want to be there and see that done. I want the PUD to remain a real solid business, nonprofit government business, but nevertheless run like a business. I really want to solve some water quality issues. Water right, if we could get the water rights issues in Whatcom County solved in the next 6 years, I would be very, very happy. And I thank you again for tonight, and I'd appreciate your support on November 6th.
And Mr. Stone.
I too would like to thank the League of Women Voters and again all others that were involved in putting this forum together. Again, I'd like to thank Paul for his 32 years of service. I have to disagree with him, or this wouldn't be called a campaign. I feel like I can bring new ideas and a fresh approach to the PUD. I do understand that it is a business, it's a nonprofit, and I feel like the PUD can do more for our entire community. I don't feel like we've done a bad job with the industry. I don't feel like we've done a bad job with agriculture. Sure, there are problems that are going to arise with water rights. But I do feel strongly that the PUD, it's time for the PUD to have new and fresh ideas. And I would appreciate your vote on November 6th.
Right, thank you very much. That was very informative. I think we learned something about the PUD. I know myself, I didn't know a whole lot about it. Our next debate is with candidates for the Congressional District Number 2. A state has proportional representation in the House based on the state's population. And since Washington State's population grew this past census period, we were awarded a new district. Redistricting then changed the configuration of District 2. It now includes western Snohomish and Skagit counties, Bellingham, and Whidbey and Camano Islands. A congressional representative is elected for a 2-year term. Among other things, Congress is responsible for proposing laws, writing the tax codes, regulating trade and commerce, and funding the military. The salary for a House representative is $174,000 a year. Please welcome our candidates, Democrat Rick Larsen and Republican Dan Matthews. All right, we did the toss of the die, and Mr. Matthews won the toss and chose to speak at the very end tonight. So he gets to go first now. Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Jane. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I come here tonight and to this candidacy with a passion for integrity and a purpose to restore trust and excellence to government and a perspective that we can do better, much better. You can't discuss government or representation, especially the Congress, without discussing and considering integrity. All else is secondary to this and to the public trust. Tonight you're going to hear two completely different perspectives on government and governing. One on the left speaks to more government, bigger government, out of control spending by its record, trickle-down government that takes from everyone and gives to some, and doesn't listen to you or trust you, it seems. Or limited government, cutting back, especially on spending, streamlining government, and trusting you. Integrity is where I will stand. Integrity is where I will focus, such as with the coal train issue and the amount of money Mr. Larsen has received from coal train interest and corporate money, causing one to wonder where his loyalties really are. Or the dishonesty and distance of Mr. Larsen living 3,000 miles away in Bethesda, Maryland. Does the public know this? And what is their reaction to that? It explains a lot and answers the question that I've been posed many times. Why is he so out of touch? Why don't we hear from him? Is he listening to us? This is what we'll be talking about tonight. The focus is on integrity. The focus is on who will represent you, who can best represent you, and who can change the direction. The past is overrepresented in Congress. It is the future that is underrepresented. And that's what I will hope to speak to tonight, the future. Thank you.
Mr. Larsen.
Thanks. Before I get started, clarify the yellow is 30 seconds or it's 15? No, thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight and to ask for your support. I want to start with a little bit about myself. I'm Rick Larsen. I'm running for Congress, and I would like your support. I was born and raised in this district. My family's been in this area for about 115 years. My sons are the 5th generation of our family to call this place home. My mom and dad, mom lives in Arlington, dad died a few years ago, but I was born and raised in Arlington. Dad worked at the Snohomish County PUD for his entire life. Mom had the harder job though. She stayed home and raised the 8 kids. I'm one of 8 kids. So we had quite an upbringing. It wasn't fancy, but it was a pretty solid one. And what I learned from my parents were values of commitment, of service, and of community. And it's those values that drive my priorities in running for re-election. And I'm running for re-election because I want to continue the work that I've been doing to improve our local economy and create jobs. I worked side by side with the men and women at the Boeing company to help land the Air Force tanker, bringing those jobs and then investment here to the Pacific Northwest instead of somewhere else. For the last 12 years, I've been working side by side with the men and women who work at the Intalco aluminum plant and the management folks there. They've been on a roller coaster ride. And you know, in about 2004, the Whatcom Chamber of Commerce and Industry recognized my work working with those folks to keep that plant open. But it was too early to get recognized because it was only 2 days ago. After 12 years of work, we finally got an announcement for a long-term power contract to keep those jobs at the Intalco plant here in Whatcom County. We should be very pleased about that, but I'm more pleased that I was able to work with these folks to help make that happen. But finally, we can do all this work, but if we're not taking care of our democratic republic, we're in trouble. And that's why I want to just note that I support the constitutional amendment to overturn the Supreme Court's decision on Citizens United. It's critical that we overturn that. I ask for your support. Thank you very much.
You got into the jobs issue already, and that was going to be our first question, and you get to go on with that a little bit, Mr. Larson. It is the #1 issue on the minds of the electorate right now, and what are your ideas for promoting future job growth?
Thanks for the question. For future job growth, it's important that first off, we ensure that we have the education and training available for the best jobs that are available. That's why I've been very supportive of increasing Pell Grant funding so that the young adults who are going to school at Western or at BTC or at Whatcom Community College have an opportunity to get the training that they need to get the best jobs available. Been helpful with Heath Techna here locally to help them get a Department of Labor grant so they can train people on the job for the aerospace supplier jobs that Heath Techna has, because it continues to be a great future in aerospace throughout this area, not just in Snohomish County, but even up here as well. I'm on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and we have to rewrite the Surface Transportation Bill in the next session of Congress, and that brings private sector construction jobs here to Whatcom County, improving upon our roads and bridges and highways, creating jobs in that construction, but also setting the foundation for future economic growth.
Mr. Matthews.
Thank you. Well, I spoke earlier of trickle-down government, and right there we see a great example of that. Rather than recognizing that 74% of the small businesses in America create the jobs in America and not government, we need to recognize that government needs to get its foot off the throat of business in America. In the last year and a half, government has increased regulations to the tune of $50 billion on small business in America. Right now, business in America pays in excess of $480 billion in fees and taxes to government. Why? So the government can do its job, or business can do its. Government is in the way. The worst thing that you can hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. I'm here to advance your jobs. I'm here to make you create. Get government out of the way of business. Let it do its job, and the economy will roar back again. We don't have a taxation problem in government, for example. We have a spending problem.
All right. What measures do you support to reduce the budget deficit? Please give specific examples of revenues and reductions. Are you willing to include the Defense Department and/or Medicare in those budget cuts? Mr. Matthews, you go first.
You bet. There's a lot in government that needs addressing. I speak often of the fact that at this point in government, when we're spending more than $1 trillion that we take in every year, it's time for Congress, especially, to lead the way and to say that we must cut back on our spending in every facet of government. If every agency in government were just held to the budget from the year before, we would cut spending by 20%. Right now, government, we know, is out of control. Yes, the military. Yes, the education department. Yes, every department in government needs to look at their spending and see how can we make it more efficient. The military should be audited, certainly. We know that. But every agency in government has gotten so big and so cumbersome. That's why we need to get back to the idea, the concept, the commitment to limited government. Jefferson told us the tendency of government is to gain and for liberty to subside. We need to stop that.
Mr. Larson.
Thanks for the question. In order to reduce the deficit, I believe we need to take a balanced approach. That's going to mean spending cuts. It's going to mean revenue increases, and I'm willing to raise the tax rates on the folks, on the wealthiest 2%, as part of a broader package of deficit reduction. Spending cuts should include cutting ag subsidies, oil and gas subsidies. Congress itself has frozen salaries. We have increased retirement contributions for federal employees, and that's contributing to deficit reduction right now. But if we're going to truly address this deficit over the next decade, we need a long-term and balanced approach that includes spending cuts and revenue increases. It's the only way to really, truly address this. And I think in a decade, we'll be a stronger country for it. It may be difficult now, but in a decade, we'll be a stronger country for it.
Both political parties have expressed the need to reform the income tax code. What measures do you recommend? Mr. Larson, you go first.
With regards to the income tax, again, I want to reiterate, as part of a deficit reduction package, we ought to include returning to the tax rates for the high-income folks, the same tax rates that we had in the high-growth late 90s. That's the first thing that we ought to do. We also need to look at corporate tax reform. And there is a way to decrease corporate taxes, but only by paying for them through getting rid of the deductions and loopholes that are in the corporate tax code. You can't do it any other way without exploding the deficit once again. And Democrats and Republicans generally agree on this point, getting at corporate tax reform by closing deductions and loopholes. So I think there's a couple ways to get at both income tax reform for personal income taxes as well as corporate tax reform.
Mr. Matthews.
Could you repeat the question fully, please?
Yes, if I can find it here. Both political parties have expressed the need to reform the income tax code. What measures do you recommend?
Good. Well, I think the first step is obvious. Comprehensive tax reform is a must. We need a fair, simpler, much simpler tax code. 80,000 pages is not the answer. And the loopholes that are in the tax code right now, where Microsoft last year paid zero in tax, has got to stop. We need everybody contributing to our government. That's the only way that we're going to get back on track. I'm not in favor of increasing tax rates precipitously in this economy. That would cripple the economy and any recovery that would occur. We need to time things appropriately. That's just an economic and tax reality. Deductions and loopholes are probably the chief aim. There are too many loopholes, especially for the higher income people. But I like the idea of everyone contributing to their government, to the government that we have. We don't need big government, we need good government, and everybody needs to contribute their fair share.
What would you do to return manufacturing to this country so that when I buy compact fluorescent lights at hardware sales, they say made in the USA? Mr. Matthews, you're first.
Well, over the last generation, what's occurred is the oppressive effort of government at taxing, fees, and burdensome regulations has forced businesses to seek survival outside this country, and that's been unfortunate. Attracting business back in seems to be the effort of even those who have been responsible for driving business out. I don't like any kind of incentive for companies to be outside the United States. I like incentives for companies to be inside the United States. The manufacturing base in America needs to know that their workers are highly trained, that the economy is stable, and that their clientele will be there for them. And that's what we need to do to restore manufacturing to its height. We have one of the best manufacturing bases in this district, in fact, in the Boeing Company and others, and we need to foster that as best we can.
Mr. Larson.
Thanks for the question. I'm a co-sponsor of legislation that would end provisions in the tax code that currently give U.S. companies the incentive to put their jobs overseas. And it would reward companies who bring jobs back from overseas. That's first. Second, we need to take advantage of the great manufacturing base that we have here. We have many small and medium-sized manufacturers throughout this area who are currently building things and sending those things they make overseas instead of sending jobs overseas. So I've actually started a program in my office, a district export initiative, to reach out to these small and medium-sized manufacturers to help them open up markets overseas for their goods. We had many successes. One in particular is a company out of Everett who had trouble getting into this foreign market called Canada. But we were able to work at that company, and now instead of $0 in revenue for that company from their sales in Canada, it's going to be $2 million by the end of this year.
All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit here. If you were able to single-handedly devise a national energy policy, what do you consider the top priorities for congressional support, especially in relation to existing natural resources and/or the development of alternative sources, and why? And this will be Mr. Larson first.
Thanks for the question. I
Long
appreciate
question.
it. Yeah,
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. I think the U.S. energy policy does need to start with renewable energy, recognizing that if we can broaden the energy portfolio that we have in this country, that is the kind of energy that we use, away from fossil fuels and into alternative sources of energy, it makes us more secure as a country. I think we also though need to recognize as well that fossil fuels aren't going away. And I've been very supportive of additional environmental regulations on continued drilling in the Gulf in order to meet the clear concerns that we have as a country when you look at what happened with the Deepwater Horizon accident. And that drilling didn't start up again until companies were willing to meet tougher environmental regulations that should have been in place, in the first place.
I think the view really is one that we should be pursuing energy independence. We're fortunate in this country to have incredible natural resources, and the technology exists to exploit those resources, if you will, in an environmentally friendly way. We just, of course, in the last few years learned that we have incredible natural gas resources in the United States, and the oil shale and oil sands resources that we have in the Midwest can be fully tapped into making our country independent and in fact allowing us to ship overseas. It's curious that Representative Larson says these things, yet he voted against the XL pipeline, which would have brought an incredible number of jobs and spoken to energy independence and been in concert with our friends in Canada. There are always environmental concerns, and we need to take special attention to those. We do have legitimate energy resources and alternative energy resources. We should have incentives for all of those. Thanks.
This is energy a little closer to home. Do you support doing a programmatic EIS environmental impact statement to study the cumulative impacts of the proposed coal terminals in our Northwest region? And this will go to Mr. Matthews first.
Yeah, well, the coal train issue is an issue that Mr. Larson and I seem to agree substantially on. And I think that with anything that's that far-reaching, that goes through this entire district, starting at the southern part in Snohomish County, those trains come all the way through, up through Everett and Marysville and Everett, up through the Skagit County and up into Whatcom County. There's not just coal that's at issue. What we're talking about is the impact on the public. Just the other day, my wife and I waited for 6.5 minutes as a train went by in Marysville. 6.5 minutes. If we'd been in an emergency aid car, I wonder what our concern would have been. The devil is always in the details, in legislation and things that occur, and we need to take a really far-reaching look. The coal train issue, I hope you'll have more questions on it because there's a lot of things to discuss in this issue.
Larson.
I'd agree there's a lot of things to discuss on this issue. That's why I implore the community to participate in the open and transparent scoping process that's taking place right now. There's a scoping meeting in Bellingham on October 20th, and I implore the community to participate in this meeting along with other scoping meetings to get your views heard, to make the agencies hear what you want to have in the EIS. In the environmental impact statement. With regards to a programmatic EIS, I know people want me to support that. I have to say I'm not convinced there's an actual legal authority to have a programmatic EIS that extends as far as folks want to have it. Programmatic EISs happen all the time, but I don't believe there's been one or even a precedent for doing a programmatic EIS to the extent that the folks are asking for one. But I encourage folks, please participate in the scoping process.
As you said, this is a big subject, so we're going to ask you to expand a little bit on your views on GPT. And Mr. Larson, would you please go first?
First thing I want to say is what I tell everybody up front. I support this project. When I looked in the faces of the men and women who would have an opportunity to go to work, both in construction as well as in operating, knowing that we have in Whatcom County, the average wage is less than the statewide average, and the average wage for this project is about twice the Whatcom County wage. We need these jobs. It's important when we have thousands unemployed here, have an opportunity to put hundreds to work. But I also want to, again, get back to the point about the scoping process. This is the process that we have under the National Environmental Policy Act. It was put in place in the 70s so that communities would have an opportunity to have a transparent and open process to have their voices heard on projects like this. So just ask everyone, please use it.
Mr. Matthews.
Thank you. I propose several things with regard to the coal trains, and the scoping and the EIS process will run its course, but we have to remember that this is a commerce issue, that these trains are going to go through onto Canada if need be, because they have the right. So I think one of the things that needs to be considered and that I would propose is up to a $1 fee added for every ton of coal that's extracted at the source. It costs about $14 a ton to extract that coal, to mine it and put it in those cars. Adding $1 for every ton would end up being about $100 million a year that could be put into a mitigation fund, a super fund, if you will, that could mitigate a lot of the damages and unforeseen, if you will, things that could happen during this shipment of coal out to the areas. Like I said, the 36 different crossings that exist throughout this district need to be addressed, because the impact in the communities, even before it gets to the terminals, is substantial.
A little bit related. What are your views on climate change and its impact locally, nationally, and globally? Mr. Matthews?
Well, if we keep selling all our coal to the Chinese, maybe the climate's really going to change. I think that anytime in the political realm you hear a statement that the science is settled on climate change, you're hearing a political statement and not a scientific statement. Scientists are increasingly looking at climate change around the world. We see the polar ice caps having a substantial melt-off in the last 3 years, and that continuing. The Earth is a dynamic cycling. I've had the luxury of flying around the world throughout my career in both the Air Force and for the airlines, and I can tell you this is a big Earth, and the climate is a magnificent thing. It seems to start in the middle of the Pacific and work its way westward and then come back at us. And I think that we need a responsible environmental policy that always anticipates what we can do as responsible stewards. But our impact on the climate, I'm afraid to say, is not as substantial as we might think. We can do our best. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Mr. Larson.
The scientific consensus is very clear. Climate change is real and it's man-made. The scientific consensus on climate change is clear. Climate change is real and it is man-made. But what can we do about it and what will we do about it? We took a shot at it a few years back in Congress on a cap and trade bill. It wasn't ultimately successful. There's a lot of criticism about that bill. I sought to make changes to it so that our folks here in Washington State could take better advantage of the provisions of it. The investments we're already making in renewable energy, in a clean energy economy. We've taken a lot of steps already in Washington State to do just that. So if we have an opportunity to develop a cohesive national energy policy, it does need to start with renewable energy, because that will help us take the first steps to deal with climate change.
All right, we're going to switch subjects here. What are your views on Obamacare generally, and how do you feel that it will affect the health care for U.S. veterans in particular? Mr. Larson.
Thanks. I supported the Affordable Care Act. I think we should move forward and implement it and make adjustments as we go forward. One of the adjustments I'd like to see that we make is that we take the changes that we made to the reforms in payment and delivery to Medicare and apply those nationwide rather than just in terms of pilot projects. So we're doing great things up here at Peace Health, St. Joe's, having to do with medical home models and bundled payments that they want to do, and they probably will do through the pilot projects, but we can be more successful with that if we take that nationwide. It's interesting the question comes up about veterans because the Affordable Care Act was written specifically to exempt the VA and veterans health care. So I can say with confidence that the Affordable Care Act does not have an impact on VA health care.
Mr. Matthews.
Well, I think there are many commendable aspects to the Affordable Care Act, but the first thing I would say that's necessary is that something that was so hastily drawn up and considered needs to be repealed and then revisited with an individual approach, looking at those commendable aspects, such as catastrophic care, the donut hole, children on their parents' policies up to 26, pre-existing conditions. All of those could be addressed individually through legislation without taking over 1/6 of the U.S. economy. And we could add to those which weren't added in there, tort reform, HSAs, portability, marketplace competition. All of these affect the viability of healthcare in America and Medicare. Medicare is at risk because of the invasion of healthcare and the taking of funds from that to make healthcare, the Affordable Care Act happen. I'm always curious why the Congress excluded itself from the ACA if it's so commendable an act.
A follow-up on that. So if you are elected or re-elected, what particular steps would you take in Congress to either change or add your ideas to that act? And Mr. Matthews, you're first.
Well, I think that I already mentioned some of those aspects. Some of the things that should be looked at, the individual mandates and the waivers, and there's an incredible amount of politicization of the Affordable Care Act, where some are getting waivers and some are not. I think the idea that this should be a state-run or privatized system that allows the people to better run and not the federal government to take over a system like this. Our government is breaking itself just by its own inertia, taking over and taking care of things that it cannot afford. We need to ask the questions: can we afford this? Is this the proper role of the federal government? What is the responsibility of the individuals? And what are the responsibility of the states? These questions need to be addressed, and I'm a specific proponent of HSAs and tort reform and those kind of things, but going back to the states is the first thing.
Mr. Larson.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Given that you have different ideas on Obamacare, what would you do if, in your case, being reelected, when you get to Congress again, to either improve it or to change it?
Thanks. Let me dispel people of a notion right now, and folks may not believe it, but let me dispel you the notion that Congress is exempt from the provisions of the Affordable Care Act. It isn't. Members of Congress are not exempt from the provisions of the Affordable Care Act. That's one thing. Second is, if you followed my Republican opponent's approach to repealing this and then trying to reinstate something, why should we repeal things like a ban on pre-existing conditions or letting young adults get onto their parents' program, insurance program, just to return and try to do it again? Why should we do that? We shouldn't do it. We shouldn't do it. I've already laid out one change I think we ought to try to make, and that is take these pilot programs on Medicare payment and delivery and try to bring those to all of Medicare, not just make them pilots.
All right, Mr. Larson now. America infrastructure, roads, bridges, airports, telecommunications, are aging. Some are crumbling. How do you see correcting this, and how would you pay for it? And that's for you, Mr. Larson.
America's roads, bridges, and highways and other infrastructure gets about a D grade from the American Council of Engineering Consultants. They looked at all the infrastructure in the country, and they give it in the United States about a D grade. We need to look at our infrastructure in this country as a platform for economic growth that supports our economic growth. We just recently passed, Congress passed in June, a reauthorization or a re-upping of the surface transportation bill to repair our roads, our bridges, and our highways. That's paid for through the federal portion of the gas tax that you pay when you go fill up your tank. That money goes into Highway Trust Fund, is used only for transportation infrastructure, and then it goes out to the states. One change that we made in that is a bipartisan amendment this year, I worked on with a Republican from Alaska, to increase the amount of dollars that are available in the ferry program, and Washington State stands to get a 45% increase in ferry construction money and ferry terminal construction money just because of the changes I helped make.
Matthews.
I think, like with anything that is this far-reaching, the infrastructure of the United States, going back as far as President Eisenhower, when he committed to the national highway system as a security measure, among others, for the United States, there has to be a national policy, a national commitment. In this case, I can tell you that as a pilot, one of the best things that we always consider is preventive maintenance. That is, getting ahead of any problems. We don't like engines failing on us. We like to make sure that we're ahead of the issue. And with regard to highways, especially bridges, railroads, communication, all of the things that are under the infrastructure umbrella, all of these need to be addressed. We need a national energy policy, or excuse me, national infrastructure policy that makes a goal, a specific commitment. If we can put men on the moon, we can take care of the infrastructure in this country through fees and taxes, like was mentioned in the gas tax and other things. We can do this.
And this is a follow-up. And this will be for Mr. Matthews to begin with, do you support high-speed rail? And if we were offered in Washington State the same deal that some of the states have turned down to do this, would you accept those funds from the federal government?
First question, can we afford this? We're at a time in our economy and the stagnation that we're looking at right now. Can we afford to build multi-billion, trillion-dollar systems, if you will, that, like the bridge to nowhere, have questionable purposes? I've been around the world, like I said. I've been in Japan and rode the high-speed rail, and I've seen the effectiveness and usefulness of that. Our country is a little bit bigger and a little bit more expansive. And I think the commitment that we have should be to the existing systems that we have based on the economy, the economics involved. I shudder to think what the white elephant that California has started is going to result in.
Larson.
Could you just repeat that question?
Well, it's about the infrastructure again, and I asked if you do support high-speed rail, and would you accept for Washington State and support accepting some of the federal monies that other states have rejected?
The answer to the first question about supporting high-speed rail is yes. The answer to the second question about accepting money from other states is yes, because we've already done it, and I've already written letters to the Secretary of Department of Transportation asking him to reallocate money that these other states rejected and reallocate that money to Washington State. And that's already happened. The money's already been reallocated, and Washington State was able to get some of that for rail improvements here in Washington State. But more important, there's an important thread here. Just at the time when ridership is increasing on Amtrak in the Cascades run, The across-the-board spending cuts, for all the focus that we've had on the defense industry, these across-the-board spending cuts, these across-the-board spending cuts will mean a multi-million-dollar cut to Amtrak, just at a time when we're seeing ridership increases on Amtrak Cascades.
All right, and we're changing our subject again. How would you approach immigration reform? Please include your views on the DREAM Act, guest worker programs, a path to citizenship, and securing our borders. And we're starting with you, Mr. Larson.
Congress has not addressed immigration policy like it should. This president has not addressed immigration policy like he should. In the next Congress, we need to address immigration policy. We need strong borders, we need to enforce our laws, but comprehensive immigration reform has to provide a path to legalization for folks who are here. They pay a penalty, they haven't committed a crime, they can get in the back of the line. Not in the front of the line, in the back of the line. But the DREAM Act is important, and I voted for the DREAM Act. I support the DREAM Act unequivocally. I support its details. We need to pass it. The President took a bold step to sign an executive order that didn't implement the DREAM Act. It implemented parts of the DREAM Act that he thought he could do through an administrative executive order. It was a necessary step, it was an important step, and I supported that.
Mr. Matthews.
I support the DREAM Act in part, in many parts of it, but I think that what the public is calling for across America, in the last poll I saw that said that nearly 80% of Americans want secure borders. They want immigration. We're a country of immigrants, and we know that. They want immigration by the rules. We're a nation of rules, the rule of law, and we need everyone to respect and abide by those rules. Going to the back of the line, certainly, but I think we have the capacity to identify people who are here and to ask those people to abide by the rules, to get back in line, if you will. But there are a lot of people who spend 8 to 10 years trying to become a citizen by the rules. What a frustration for them. I'd like to see this happen with the Congress leadership and not with the President overriding the Congress and coming out with tedious executive orders.
Mr. Matthews, what actions do you believe are needed for long-term sustainability of Social Security and Medicare, and what are your reasons for this view?
Okay, both Social Security and Medicare have been are promises that we have made, and those are promises that need to be kept. We need to preserve them for the future. And it's been the habit of the Congress to put things at risk just about the time that they look like they're viable. For example, how many of us remember that the Social Security Trust Fund was raided by the Democrats, by President Johnson, to pay for social programs, and thus jeopardizing another social program, robbing from Collective Peter to pay Collective Paul. And so the $2.7 billion or trillion trust fund that's supposedly in Social Security is not there. It's an IOU from the government. Both Social Security and Medicare are at risk. They're not sustainable under the current system, and there needs to be a wholesale revision and a look at those to make them sustainable so that they will be available to pay the promises that they are.
Thank you. I was 3 years old when President Johnson made the changes to the Social Security Fund. So I don't necessarily feel responsible for what he did. I do feel responsible now for how we address the long-term viability of Social Security. I think the first step we need to do is to scrap the cap. That is, to remove the cap on the tax that is on income that goes into Social Security. That's the first step we need to take, and when we negotiate the long-term viability of Social Security, that will be my starting position. Medicare is a bigger problem, a bigger financial problem, just by sheer numbers. Changes that we made through the Affordable Care Act will bring seniors into Medicare using preventive benefits of preventive health care, and 20 years later they'll be healthier and they won't need as much, they won't need health care that's as expensive as a senior today.
We're going to continue with that question a little bit because I have a feeling both of you would like to talk a little longer on it. So would you address, and we'll continue with you, Mr. Larson, again, costs and how would you pay for keeping Medicare going? You suggested one thing just now.
When Medicare was put together, well, it's 47 years old. It's as old as I am, and I know I need to make changes every once in a while. Medicare was set up like healthcare was set up then. Private sector healthcare has changed and Medicare hasn't. So it is important that we change Medicare to be consistent in some ways with the way private health insurance is run. We try to encourage people to come in to get preventive health care in order to save them costs later on in their life because they're healthier now because we took care of them because they got preventive health care. We don't do that, and we didn't do that in Medicare until we made a change to the Affordable Care Act. So then that changes in place. A second change is to change payment and delivery options and the incentives in the payment and delivery. And in the Affordable Care Act, we made changes, but only changes that are pilot projects, not long-term, nor do they apply to Medicare through all of Medicare. And I just think we need to have those pilot projects as part of all of Medicare.
Mr. Matthews.
I think we're kidding ourselves if we ever think that we're going to turn over a system, whatever it is, to the federal government and expect it to be more efficient, less costly, less burdensome, and in any way better than it was before. The post office, Social Security itself, all of the federal programs that we see are wasteful and burdensome and inefficient. The costs, the devil in the details with the Affordable Care Act, the Unaffordable Care Act is just amazing. When we look at the cost to people, 2012 right now, people are paying $96.40 or whatever a month. It's going to go up in 2014 to $247 a month for our seniors. That is unsustainable for those people. Government may say that's fine, but the devil is in the details, and we are putting a burden. The cost containments are not there. And what we really need to see is, for example, the mandated extra expenses on health care, $768 billion last year, need to be cut.
Well, you get to keep on talking because you get the next question too. What steps would you take to curtail rising TRICARE costs for veterans implemented in this fiscal year?
That hits close to home. I pay for TRICARE. My son is in the Air Force Reserves and he has TRICARE. Any veteran knows that the promised benefits, the health benefits that we receive under TRICARE were benefits that we were entitled to as deferred compensation. And I spoke a while ago about promises broken. And when the federal government decides that they're going to attack the veterans, and on the back of veterans and servicemen, those who are sacrificing, especially their families, so much, that they are going to triple and quadruple the rates over the next 2 years, we have to be real and say, all right, what about the rest of federal employees? Public service employees have been told they are not going to have their health care costs raise. Civilian defense workers, yet their pay is 132% of their civilian counterparts, and their pensions is 144%. We need to be fair to all federal employees and not just attack the military people.
Mr. Larson.
Thanks for the question. This year, the Obama administration proposed a lot of changes, many changes to TRICARE. And those changes came to Congress, and Congress rejected those, voted against those. I voted against those changes. Last year, there was a change made in enrollment fees in the previous year's budget, because in TRICARE, the enrollee used to pay about 27% of the premium, about the same in the private sector. Today, it's about 10%. Even with the changes that we made last year, not this year, because there are no changes this year, last year, it's still going to be in about 2017, about 14% out of pocket. Still well below where the free market and private sector insurance is.
We're going to stay with veterans a little bit. What do you think will most impact the homecoming veterans that are coming back from some already from Iraq and Afghanistan? And what do you believe the Congress should do to meet their needs? Mr. Larson.
Thanks for the question. I think first and foremost, it's trying to be sure these folks have an opportunity to get the education and training they need to get back into the workforce. I co-sponsored and voted for the Vow to Hire Heroes Act, which gives tax credits to small businesses to hire veterans. The GI Bill for the 21st century that helps pay for 100% of the tuition for these young adults who are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan to go to the college of their choice. We've seen folks at Western, at Whatcom, at VTC take advantage of this. So they get the training, give incentives to employers to hire them. But for those who are coming home with wounds that we can see and we can't, or sometimes we can't see, we need to be sure that we're investing in the veterans' health care and the military health care system to take care of these folks who are bringing home these injuries.
Mr. Matthews.
Again, you're hitting close to home. The impact on veterans does not just happen when they come home. Their families are already dealing with the impact when their loved ones are deployed. And those impacts need to be addressed more fully because servicemen, while they may get some, we talked about health care benefits, their pay is far below what any civilian counterpart is if you just talk about police or anyone else who is exposed to enemy fire. But when we talk about bringing them back, we need to bring them back in an honorable, committed way. One thing that has been avoided and missed by the Congress is bringing back GIs through the Reserve and National Guard to, if you will, decompress them more fully and more adequately so that if there are problems, it can be viewed by commanders. We need a STEM education and other ways of bringing them back in, and we need hiring preferences.
Do you support a balanced budget amendment, Mr. Matthews? And if you do, why? And if you don't, why not?
Well, we have two choices: replace the whole Congress or have a balanced budget amendment. The Congress has seemingly lost the spine, the courage to face the budget. They can spend freely, but they can't balance the budget. I think the American people are tired of gridlock in Washington, D.C. They want action and they want answers. And if the balanced budget amendment is the only way to have the Congress act to restore sanity to our budgeting process, so be it. Because the out-of-control spending that we are doing today is going to cripple the future. Our economy is going to be crippled, and especially for our children and our grandchildren. The debt now today for someone born in America is $52,000 plus. That is their debt on the day they're born. That comes from the Congress continuing to spend without being in control of itself. And overpromising and not paying as they go is going to cripple our economy.
Larson.
No, I don't support it. My opponent does. But I think when folks look at who you want to vote for and how you should make decisions, try to make decisions based on somebody who's going to look at the budget responsibly, knowing that we have challenges about how to get to a balanced budget. But the first challenge is just getting to deficit reduction and taking a balanced approach to that. The balanced budget amendment sounds great on paper. It looks great on paper. The devastating impacts, because of the way it's been written and the way it's been proposed by the Republican majority, the devastating impacts to Social Security, to Medicare, to the investments that we want to make as a country in basic research, in infrastructure, in education, those impacts are extremely real, extremely negative, and we need to take a more balanced approach so we can account for those investments that we need to make while we're moving towards deficit reduction.
How do you propose to end the gridlock in Congress on so many vital issues. Mr. Larson first.
First off, I'd say live by example. Look at the work I did working with a Republican to rewrite a simple portion of the transportation bill. It turned out not to be very simple at all, the changes to the ferry discretionary program. But still working with a Republican to make that happen. Look at the work I'm doing right now. We're actually negotiating a Coast Guard authorization bill in Congress, even as we speak here tonight. And I'm working with my Republican counterparts on the Transportation Committee to get the language right. The work I did to pass a piece of environmental legislation out of the House of Representatives, in this House of Representatives, a piece of environmental legislation to protect a salmon-bearing creek on the Skagit River. The work I did to rewrite the pipeline safety bill with a Republican colleague from Pennsylvania. And with that same Republican colleague, led a defense business panel to find ways for small businesses to access defense contracting. I have the examples that I think people can look to.
Mr. Matthews.
Well, I think the clearest formula is that the people who got us into this mess are not going to be the ones who get us out. Gridlock has become not just vogue, but it's become the standard back in Washington, D.C. on both sides of the aisle, in both houses. And what we need to see is a little more courageous leadership. We need to see a change in Washington, D.C. We hear of bipartisanship. We hear of some bills passed and not bills. What we have here is, for Representative Larson, is in 2011 and 2012, no personal bills passed, none. Bipartisan bills passed, 5. Many proposals and many ideas, but we need more bipartisanship. We need the aisle to disappear. We need, like I said, all things to get out onto the table and some courageous leadership of people who say, we've got some challenges before us, we need to address them with a new paradigm. The political climate in this country has got to stop. We have got to quit seeing a political gentry, a protected class of career politicians who know how to get reelected, but don't know how to listen and serve the people.
Well, we're coming to a close now, and it's time for your closing statements. And Mr. Larson, it's up to you to go first.
Thank you. Thank you very much for an opportunity to be here, and I hope to have the support of Bellingham. I want to thank Bellingham and Whatcom County for delivering 66% of the primary vote to me in August, and I'm hopeful that we can have that same kind of response in the general election. In fact, today even I was out doorbelling in Fairhaven, the Fairhaven area here in Bellingham, because it's important to me to continue to get out to voters and hear from them. I have a list of accomplishments that I think have been very important. In the 2011-2012 session of Congress, I have had bills, my bills, that have passed, that have become law. What you heard from Mr. Matthews isn't true. It's just flat out not true. I have a list of accomplishments, but there's more work to be done. And improving the local economy and creating jobs is my top priority. I think it's the right priority for the 2nd District. Because of that, I hope that you'll support me in my reelection. Thank you.
And Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Jane. And thank you for the opportunity to come together and to discuss the issues. Obviously, we can only touch the tip of the iceberg in presenting ourselves. And you can go to our website, you can see more about us, and you can certainly call us and contact us. Again, I submit the past is overrepresented in Congress. It's the future that's underrepresented. Gridlock is the standard in Washington, D.C. We need a change. Again, we can't expect those who got us into the condition that we're in today, and we are in a serious condition, and every American knows that. Is our country headed in the right direction? 70% of Americans say no. Does the integrity of our elected representative matter? Yes, it does. Is it important that he lives in Bethesda, Maryland, and not here? Yes. Do we have optimism for our children in the future? 86% of Americans say, no, we're not optimistic, for the first time in American history. We need a change. We need a bold change. We need leadership. Who better to represent veterans, people from Boeing, union people, than someone who has been that and who will lead into the future with boldness and clarity. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you, and thank you both for being here tonight and also for running for office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This debate, just a reminder, our fourth and last voter forum will be Saturday, October 13th at City Hall. Doors open at 9:30. We'll be debating the local ballot issues and the Superior Court race. Thanks to all the League members who have helped with these forums, and once again, thank you to the City and the Bellingham Herald for their help in producing and publicizing this forum. Ballots should be arriving in your mailbox soon. We know you will vote because you are here. Please help educate your friends and family and encourage them to vote also. Once more, let's thank all the candidates that joined us here tonight.
I belong to a lot of organizations, but the League I really like because they promote civil discussion.
They're not knee-jerk decisions. It's big picture thinking in the League. Actually having conversations about issues where they don't necessarily agree.
I think my vote, personally, my individual vote is worth far less than the impact that I have on others who come to me and we discuss the issues and really engage in a meaningful fashion.
They broaden their perspective so that they're able to see more eye to eye and come to agreement on points of values.
I can impact so many more people, I can impact the community, and I think it's a chance for young people to see themselves as part of their generation as a community who's going to be defining the world that they're going to be living in.
The results of elections are what determines what goes on in our country, in our state, in our local government. It's the only way we have to really voice what it is we want from our government.